The following video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. The information presented in the following video is not intended to influence any decisions and is therefore not financial advice. Each product mentioned has its own set of uses, and your own personal decisions should be well informed and strictly based on your personal circumstances. Please set an appointment or seek out another financial professional to help you assess your situation before making any large financial decisions.
All right, let's make ourselves a loans tier list. As a general rule of thumb, no product that we talk about here will be completely worthless. Each product, each tool, will have its own set of use cases, no matter how niche or specific those uses might be. So I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about these things, since we'll be ranking them. And remember that even though something may be ranked low, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have any use cases or that you will never need to use this product. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the criteria. So we'll be having 4.5 or 5 different ranking criteria, just depending on how you want to view these. Number 1 is ease of access. Now, if you're getting a loan, then, it should be accessible. You should be able to actually get the loan. So of course, we'll be ranking it based on how accessible these things are. Now, we also don't want our loans to be too accessible, because usually the easier it is to get a loan, the fewer criteria that there are in order for you to get it, then the more risks that are generally associated with those loans. But we're not going to be changing our ease of access criteria for that. That'll have its own different criteria later. Number 2 is this loan necessary for what it sets out to accomplish? Now, speaking for your average population, whatever you're seeking to do with this loan, do you need to borrow money in order for you to do it effectively? Now, again, we're talking about your average everyday person. Now, criteria 2.5 or 3, this is the one that's kind of iffy. If it's not necessary, then is it at least useful? So again, what the loan sets out to do, does it do it very well, even if it's not entirely necessary? And or does it have a lot of different uses that you could apply it to? Criteria number 4. Criteria number 4. Average interest rate. Now, generally speaking, interest rates, are very market dependent. So mortgages from today are very different from mortgages from 5 years ago. But also they can vary pretty wildly depending upon the kind of loan. So mortgage loan rates are going to look pretty different from auto loan rates, and they're going to look pretty different from credit card interest rates, for example. So of course, the higher the average interest rate, then the lower we're going to have to rank the loan. And then the 5th criteria are just all of the different risks associated with a particular loan. And there isn't really any real limit to how we can measure or weigh a risk. It's going to be pretty arbitrary, I'm not going to lie. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into our first loan. All right, so first up, we got home loans. Yeah, let's just get those out the way. Mortgages, absolutely S tier. So going ahead and looking at our criteria, ease of access. They are accessible, right? A lot of people own homes in the United States, but they're not too accessible, right? Like, you need to have actual requirements. Like, you need to make sure that you can afford the loan. Like, you need to there's a bare minimum amount of income that you need. Not to mention, the loan is weighed against the home itself, right? So you're committing to buy this house. Obviously, you don't own the home until it's all paid off, but it is secured by something. And then, of course, on average, your typical person isn't going to have $500,000, $250,000, or just generally 6 figures to just throw at a home, or anything for that matter. So yes, the loan is necessary. Even if it wasn't necessary for you, is it useful? Yes, it is useful. Home loan interest rates, generally speaking, are lower than average market return. So let's say you had the cash on hand, but instead of wanting to use the cash, you wanted to get a loan. If home loans are 5, 6, 7%, even if they were 8% on average, and you wanted to put your own cash into the market for a return, market returns on the low end average around 10% per year. So the interest you'd be making from putting your money in the market would exceed the amount of money you'd be putting into the home. Not to mention the home will grow in value over time. And then of course you have rental properties and all these other different things that you can use home loans for. So yeah, this loan is absolutely S tier. Risks associated with it. Obviously, if you don't pay the loan, you lose the property. There are also different things associated with owning a home that a lot of people aren't usually prepared for. Property taxes, homeowners association, mortgage insurance, homeowners insurance. But these are more so risks associated with owning the home itself, not necessarily the loan. you could pay for a house with cash and you'd still have to deal with all of those things. Up next, we have auto loans. C tier, yeah. Yeah, auto loans are, let's see, ease of access, very easy to get. I mean, everybody in the United States has a car for the most part, right? It's got to be some obscene statistic. Let's find out how many people in the United States own cars. %92 of American households own cars. Yeah, so pretty clearly they're fairly easy to get. Is it a necessity? This one's a little strange. So getting a brand new car? Yes, this would be a necessity. I know I said people don't on average have 6 figures to throw at something. Well, they also don't tend to have 5 figures to throw at something. And frankly, in most parts of the United States, a car is necessary. But I'm also not going to lie and act like people don't go overboard with some of their car selections. A lot of us get cars with many more features than we need, and the car ends up being much more expensive than we can afford. I mean, the car market is very oversaturated, and there are plenty of places you can go and get a car for 4 figures that has everything that you need in a car, and it'll be just good enough to accomplish the goal without all the extra added stuff that you don't need, and it'll be much more affordable. So is it necessary? I'd rank it maybe 5 or 6 out of 10 on the necessity scale. Because even if you do need the car loan, again, many of us go much higher and more excessive than we need to in regards to these car loans. The amount of people I've seen take out $80,000 car loans for a pickup truck, for their 3rd pickup truck, and they can barely afford their first 2, it's very sad. It's very sad. Now, necessity aside, is it useful? Well, yes, kind of. I mean, cars are depreciating assets. So would I recommend borrowing money to buy something that is only going to go down in value? No. No, I wouldn't. I'd rank usefulness maybe a 2 or 3 out of 10. Average interest rates? Oh, these can vary very greatly. I've seen car loans as low as 2.5%, maybe lower. But I've also seen them as high as 30%. Yes, that sounds illegal, I know. But I have seen plenty of them, and good Lord, people sure do be getting these loans. So very clearly, I couldn't rank it higher than C tier just based on that. And then risks associated with the car loan, well, you lose the car, right? It is secured against something, so that's good. It's just the market surrounding auto loans, like I said, can be very toxic just because of how much we are encouraged to take out large loans for cars that are much more excessive than anything we could ever need. We are in the year 2025, right? So every car has heating. Most cars have working stereo systems. If you don't have Bluetooth, then there are attachments for you to get Bluetooth through an aux. Most cars have remote start, and if your car doesn't have remote start, then getting it installed would be much less expensive than you buying a brand new car that has it to begin with. Heated seats are nice, but are they worth going into debt for? Please. So, yeah, auto loans in C tier, purely based off the fact that they're easy to get and we need cars. That's about it. Okay, let's mix up the flow a little bit here. Let's throw in student loans. Student loans. This is a hard one. We'll throw it in B tier. So let's see. Ease of access. Extremely easy to get. Some of the easiest loans to get access to of all time. Every single 18-year-old gets it after they get out of high school. Every 18-year-old gets one. So very clearly easy to get. Necessity? They have a lot in common with the auto loans. So depending on what school you're going to, you probably can't afford to go out of pocket. There are very many schools that cost 5 figures to go per year. $40,000 over 4 years. Congratulations, you've bought yourself a luxury sports car. But we move past necessity and move towards usefulness. Is it at least useful? Yeah, Yeah, actually, student loans are useful. Having some means of degree or some kind of certification, licensure, something, these things on average will greatly increase the amount of income you'll earn over your lifetime. What they can do is they can guarantee specialization, right? Where now you can go into a particular area with a very specific skill set. And having that skill set will demand you get higher pay than if you have a job that doesn't require said skill set. And if you're smart about your educational choices, right? You pick something that is focused, that is necessary, and somewhere that is good but doesn't break the bank, then you've leveraged your debt properly, I would say. But generally speaking, of course, you have a lot of state schools where your total college debt could amount to as low as $30,000 or lower. My 4 years in university cost me about $18,000 total. And if you're going to like a community college, if you're going to a trade school or some other inexpensive institution, then it could be even lower than that. A lot of the problems surrounding student loans is again how easily accessible they are, making them kind of predatory, and then more about college culture as a whole in the United States, which is also fairly predatory. But that was me talking about the risks. We sort of skipped around, but let's see. So we talked about usefulness. Average interest rates for student loans are anywhere from 6 to 8%, 6 to 9%, somewhere in that range, which for loans as a whole can sound pretty low. But when the balances themselves are as astronomical as they are, then it can make certain student loans feel near impossible to pay off. Let's say you went to medical school. I don't know, 6, 7 years. You've accrued yourself a $250,000 student loan debt at 8 or 9%. In that time it takes you to actually become a doctor, well, the interest is building and it's building and it's building and it's building. So, maybe you get into a very accomplished position making $300,000 a year. You would think it'd be very easy for you to pay off that student debt. Well, unfortunately, because of the way interest works, not as easy as it sounds. On that kind of salary, is it possible? Yes, most definitely it is possible to pay it off fairly quickly and reasonably. But the big issue is most Americans tend to not only have one single debt that they're paying off, and it actually is much easier to squander such a powerful salary than you would think. But I will keep student loans in B tier just because of how useful it is to have, again, a well planned out and focused degree in a specialized area. Now, up next, we have, let's just go ahead and get these out the way. Let's talk about credit cards. Credit cards. The most easily accessible loan on the face of the planet. Credit cards. They will give a credit card to anybody for any reason for crazy amounts. Getting a credit card for $5,000, $6,000, maybe even $10,000, you have to do almost nothing. You can have a very middling or poor credit score and still get yourself a very high balance credit card. So if you need it, can you get it? Yes, you can. Now let's move on to number 2, necessity. Do you need it? No, you don't. Now, a lot of people end up having what we call emergency credit cards. And these, it's like in case of some emergency, I don't have the funds to do something or to get something. I have access to some money, some capital, just in case. And to most, this sounds like a pretty good idea. And if you don't have other options, then I understand why you would want such a thing. The problem is that this is a horrible reason to have a credit card. Having a credit card in case of an emergency, you should just have an emergency fund, really. The problem is that people's spending tends to be so out of whack that their ability to plan out their lives financially is so poor that we don't have emergency funds. And so having a credit card is the only accessible thing that we tend to have. So for necessity, I'll give it maybe a 2 out of 10 if I'm being generous. Usefulness, well, credit cards can be useful. Yes, there are plenty of uses for a credit card. The main one is having one to build up your credit. Very good. Very, very easy place, or rather a very easy product to use to build up your credit. And if you use them properly, they can be very, very low risk for building up that credit history. Emphasis on can be low risk. Now, average interest rates. Ugh. It is possible to have a credit card with a 9% interest rate. Maybe lower. Maybe. But unfortunately, these banks want to make a lot of money. And they make a lot of money off of these credit cards. How many credit cards sit around an average of 20 to maybe even 30%? That is most credit cards. Most credit cards sit between 20 and 30% for their interest rates. And they can't go any higher than C tier for that reason, just like we did auto loans. The remission here is that you don't have to owe money, right? You don't have to pay an interest rate. As long as you are paying your card off before the end of your billing cycle, you won't see a single interest payment in your entire life if you do things that way. So it's good that it is optional, and we will give it a couple of extra points for that. But now we talk about risks. The risks with these credit cards come in how, number one, easy they are to get, and number two, how easy they are to use. It is possible to, like I said, never see an interest rate. You rack up points on a card and you get absolutely free rewards. They cost you nothing. They will cost you not a single dollar if you just paid off your statement before your billing cycle. And this would be absolutely great. I mean, free rewards, who would say no to that? The problem is that the vast majority of people do carry a balance. You might be more likely to see, Michael Jackson singing a duet with a unicorn than seeing somebody who doesn't carry credit card balances. And he's dead. So it is a very easy trap to fall into. Most people fall into them. The average amount of credit card debt your average American holds is $16,000. That is 5 figures. And remember what I said about your average American not having 5 figures to throw at something, like a car? Yeah. So you could imagine how much these are being paid off. They're not. Just to kind of give you an idea about how much interest that is. $16,000 with a 20% a year interest rate. How much do you think that is? So 10% of 16,000 is 1,600, 1,600. Multiply that by 2 and we get $3,200. So that is interest amount of $3,200 for $16,000 worth of credit card debt. Over 12 months is just shy of about $300. $300 a month. Your average American is paying $300 a month in credit card interest. Now, realistically speaking, should I take people's lack of discipline and use it to downrate credit cards? Probably not, but the whole market surrounding credit cards is literally geared towards this particular thing happening because credit card companies, banks want to make their money. So yeah, I'm going to rate it against credit cards. I don't think they're worth it. F tier. Now for the next loan, oh man, how did that get there? Yeah, that says follow and subscribe. I've never heard of that loan. Why don't we go ahead and give it a try though? Let's go ahead and give that loan a try. And on the next tier list, we can go ahead and rank it and see how it goes, huh? Okay, since we just did credit cards, let's go ahead and get this out the way. Cash advance. Yeah, so this isn't necessarily a loan. This is a feature on your credit card. You can take your card, put it through an ATM, and get cash for it instead. This is a horrible idea because cash advance interest rates are additional to your credit card interest rate. So you're paying a separate rate for the cash advance. So you're already paying your credit card balance, but now the balance of the cash advance is another interest rate you're paying on top of that. So this is something you really want to avoid doing at almost all costs. Just don't do it. This is horrible. I'm not going to make a tier lower than F, but if I could, I would put this even lower than F because there's pretty much no good reason to ever do this. Speaking of loans that have no good reason to ever be used ever on the face of the earth, 401k. Yeah, 401k loans. I mean, number one, you're borrowing money against yourself and you're being charged interest for it. And then number two, it is costing you money from your 401k. I mean, don't borrow against your retirement. Personal loans. Let's go through the criteria here. So let's see, ease of access. These are fairly easy to get. Personal loans, very similar to credit cards. Functionally, these are actually pretty much the same thing. Honestly, I think the form factor, however, makes a huge difference. A personal loan can be gotten in cash. It can be deposited right into your account. It can be gotten as a check, typically paid in one big lump sum. Now, whether or not they are a necessity is a little difficult to answer, mostly because they have a wide variety of uses. So a lot of the time they're used for home improvement, they're used for debt consolidation. Maybe you want to get a very old car that's in good condition, that's used, but your standard bank, credit union, or dealership isn't going to give you as good a deal on this as they would a newer car, so you settle for a personal loan. And if you really need a car and you don't have the cash to shell out on hand, this could be a pretty decent alternative, right? I get a personal loan for $5,000 on an old car over 5 years. That's going to be much better than getting an auto loan on a brand new car for $30,000, right? Even if the interest rate on the personal loan might be higher, this is still generally going to be a better decision for you. Of course, that greatly depends on the rate, right? So all of this depends. Just speaking about it purely on paper, over most circumstances, this isn't bad. Now, of course, if you just properly save toward whatever it is you were doing, then you wouldn't need the personal loan, right? Of course, you don't want to borrow money for things that you can't afford, realistically speaking. So necessity, I will have to rank this one pretty low. Usefulness, very useful. A lot of different things that these loans can do, and they tend to perform pretty well as long as you treat them with care. Now, average interest rates. This is rough. The average interest rate on these varies so wildly depending upon where you're getting your loan that it's hard for me to give them a concrete ranking. It's very difficult. I've seen interest rates as low as 8%. 8% is something that on average is reasonable depending on what it is that you're borrowing, especially on a loan that is unsecured, right? Where there is no collateral for the loan, they're just giving you the money to borrow. How many times have you seen a credit card rate for 8%? You don't. But I've also seen rates as astronomically high as to be in the several hundreds. I have seen a 700% interest rate. I mean, whatever face you're making upon hearing that, I have made the exact same face. I didn't even know rates could go that high. The highest rate I'd seen before that was maybe about 200, 300, 400%, which is still ridiculous. But I had never even thought it would be remotely conceivably possible for there to be a 700% interest rate on a personal loan. I mean, that's so bad that it has to carry from our criteria of interest rates into our criteria of risks, because this is a risk to your entire life. Like a 700% interest rate, a 100% interest rate loan could ruin your entire life. Your entire life could be financially destroyed, cataclysmically demolished if you had a loan with that kind of rate. So it makes it difficult to rank the personal loan very well because it has uses. And if used intelligently, then it can do you pretty well. But oftentimes they're not used well because the level of responsibility required to handle an unsecured loan of the sizes you can get them for, it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of responsibility that, again, your average person just doesn't have financially. So I think I'm going to rank them higher than credit cards just because of form factor and because of those extra uses we talked about. But generally speaking, these aren't great loans either. If you can avoid getting a personal loan, I definitely would. In fact, most people get personal loans to solve a credit card problem. Like, look at this tier list and tell me that is not a bad idea. I mean, it can save you a lot of money in consolidation. It's just, you shouldn't need to consolidate in the first place. And most people, when they do consolidate, they go ahead and make the same decisions they did before. So you're taking something, a mistake you made, and you're putting yourself in a position to make it worse because you didn't have the discipline to not have this first situation happen. Business loan. So business loans are not super easily accessible. So business loans, obviously it changes depending on where you're getting it, but it also changes pretty wildly depending on the kind of business you're looking to set up. And so these can be actually pretty tight to get your hands on. You're not going to be able to just walk into a bank and say, I want a business loan. So they're not super easily accessible. I give it maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10 on accessibility. Again, that's being generous. Now, necessity, is it necessary? For most people, starting a business is pretty expensive. So, I mean, having a loan to start a business, depending on the nature of the business, could be very helpful. It could be very helpful. I do have to knock some points off of this because the wonderful invention of the internet has made costs for building a business much lower than they were back when you had to make a storefront for whatever it is you were trying to do, right? Being able to fully function and operate online with just a smartphone, a camera, and an internet connection, yeah, that has made things significantly easier and has definitely knocked some points down off of the necessity, like I said, for the business loan, but it is still very useful. Starting a business and succeeding in that business can greatly increase your income in a way that working just a regular 9-to-5 job may not be able to. It gives you access to tax write-offs and all other sorts of things. There are lots and lots of benefits to being a business owner. Of course, it's also not easy, but we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about the actual business loan itself. So how would I rank the business loan? It's kind of difficult to figure out how, because business loan rates are pretty similar to student loan rates. And there can definitely be a lot of risk associated with getting it, because if you don't pay it back, you could lose the business. However, I would say the prospect of building a successful business that can really change your life and multiply your income, I'd say that's a pretty good prospect. And in most cases, in order for you to get a loan for a business, you need to already kind of have something going for you in the income department or in the savings department. You usually need some kind of asset that will help cover the cost of this loan. So I would say because of the more protective measures built into the loan, I think I'll go ahead and I'll put the business loan in A tier. It has to be at least as high as the student loan, just because of the fact that, again, it has additional protective measures like the student loan does. There's more risk associated with it. So I think I'm going to have to rate it at least as high as the student loans, because the balances are somewhat similar on average. Business loans can definitely be higher, depending on the scale of the business, right? But if you're just starting out, your balance is more than likely going to be lower. And the higher the balance you get on the loan, usually that requires your business bring in a certain amount of money to start with. So because the student loans and the business loans operate similarly as far as what they seek to accomplish, and the business loan has additional protections in it, then I think I'm going to use those things to justify ranking it a little higher than the student loan. Okay, I've been putting this one off. Payday loans. So remember at the beginning of the video, everything I said about the products we talked about today, all having their own set of use cases, and no product is completely worthless, and no matter how niche the case is, everything will have it. Yeah, all that. Nope, not on the payday loan. The payday loan is possibly the worst financial product ever made, and there's absolutely no reason to ever get a payday loan. Payday loans are like personal loans, but the balance is extremely lower, and oftentimes the lower the balance that you borrow, automatically the higher the interest rate. These are specifically engineered to have the highest interest rates ever conceivably possible known made to man. I know none of what I just said makes sense, but I need you to understand what I'm saying is that these loans are horrible by nature and you should never get one. I don't care how bad your financial situation is. I would rather have my monthly payments be late than me get a payday loan. They'd rather they just be late. Whoever it is I owe, I will talk to them and I will ask them, hey, I'm having a bit of a hard time. Can I get a little bit of extra time? Go work yourself more hours. Go get yourself a second job, a third job. Go work overtime. Start a side hustle. I don't care. Don't get a payday loan. The thing with these payday loans is they're designed to kind of get you past the hump, but the interest rate is so astronomical that when you come back to make your payment, you're paying way more than it is you took out, and now you're behind. And since you're behind because of that interest, now you have to take the payday loan back out to try to catch back up. But the interest accumulates again because you took out. And when you come back to pay it, you're paying significantly more than what you took out. So now you're behind again. So now you have to take it back out. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is what payday loans are designed to do. The moment you open that can of worms on that payday loan, you are likely to be stuck there for a very long time. Unless by some stretch of the imagination, by some miracle, you get some lump sum of money to both pay the payday loan and to both fix the issues you're having with your income, this thing will be a leech that is stuck on you for possibly the rest of your life. I've seen people who've had payday loans for 10, 20 years, maybe more. I don't even want to talk about what these rates are. Just what I said about the personal loan rates getting into several hundreds of percents. Yeah, that's what these do. They do the exact same thing, but they're specifically designed to do that. Having a very high interest rate on a personal loan, that's just a bad loan. That's almost a built-in feature of these payday loans. Don't get these. Don't. Okay, now we have a secured loan. When there is no built-in collateral, like a home, a car, an investment account of some sort, it's not weighed against really any particular asset, then what happens is you take a certain amount of money, you take a lump sum of money, you put it in some means of checking or savings account or something, and then the institution that is setting up this secured loan for you, they work in credit card form as well, and they lock it up. So now that loan is locked up, or the money in that account is locked up, and they give it back to you in the form of a loan, right? So what these tend to be used for is they tend to be very, very low risk methods of repairing credit, because you're getting a loan, but you're not actually borrowing money, it's your money. And this sounds like, pretty good idea. It's pretty safe. But number one, like we said before, you shouldn't be in this position in the first place. Number two, the idea of having your money be loaned back to you and you are charged interest on it and they make money off of loaning you your own money, it doesn't check out. It doesn't check out. These are not good. They're not good. And the only thing that's going to prevent me from putting them in F tier is the fact that they're fairly low risk. Then you don't have an overwhelmingly large balance to pay back. They tend to be pretty low balance, like $300, $500, something in that range. You're not borrowing somebody else's money, and that makes it low risk inherently. And then the last loan on our loan tier list is going to be the home equity loan. The home equity loan is basically just another form of mortgage. But what's going on is if you have equity in your home, so you've paid down the balance enough for you to have a sizable amount of ownership of it, right? You built up that balance that you own of the home, then you can do similarly to the secured loan, where you are being loaned back this amount of money to use of your home yourself. You've put $100,000 worth of equity in your home, okay? Now we are going to take that equity, put it in credit line form, right? So now it's like a credit card, sort of. You may or may not have an actual card to swipe, but it works similarly to a credit card. And now you can use this money for whatever purpose you would like, but there is an interest rate attached to it. And for most home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, as we call them, for most of them, they have what we call a variable rate. A variable rate means the rate can change. The vast majority of loans, and especially the ones that we talk about, once you have signed the papers agreeing to the loan, that interest rate is locked in for the entire duration you have the loan. So unless you go and get some means of refinance, that loan rate is never changing. Most HELOCs don't operate this way. It is possible to get a fixed rate HELOC. Those do exist, but the vast majority of them are variable rate. They will change with the market to some extent. It's not likely that you get a HELOC with a 9%, 12%, and then 6 months down the line, you now have 68%, right? That's not, it will be within reason. But yes, to summarize, this is the ability to borrow against the equity you have in your own home. They're not easily accessible. Obviously, you have to have a home and you have to have a certain amount of equity in your home to be able to borrow against. As far as necessity is concerned, well, they're not. Usefulness, they can be used for a pretty wide array of things. I mean, it's a credit line. The most common use is for home improvement. So this is good because, you know, like you're borrowing against the equity of your home. Yes, you are borrowing your own money, basically. If it's being used for home improvement, then now you are using the value of the home to increase the value of the home, right? So you add a room, you add a deck, you upgrade the appliances, you get some means of renovations. Now the value of your home has greatly increased to not really much real cost to you. As long as you're responsible with this, then the interest that you'll pay on the home equity itself is nothing compared to the amount of value that you've added to your home in this way. So it does greatly depend upon how you use it. However, I can't really rank this one very high. In fact, I think I'm going to leave it right there in C tier, just because again, it's not necessary. It's not very easily accessible, which, you know, can be a good thing by certain standards, depending on how you want to weigh it. It isn't a loan that comes up a lot, but it comes up enough to mention. You're borrowing against your own equity, so you're paying more interest on money that you've already paid. Conceptually, logically speaking, that's just not really that good. And risk, well, now you are putting another bank's name on your loan. It operates like a second mortgage on the same home. So risk is, well, you're putting your home at risk to some degree. That's a pretty big risk. But they also usually come with very low minimum payment balances, so it can be very difficult for you to fail to be able to make your monthly payments on a loan like this. So that being said, this is going to be our loan tier list. So let me know whether or not you agree in the comments. Any thoughts, questions, concerns? If you think I'm completely wrong and you want to grill me, if you want to rag on me for it, please go ahead, feel free. I'd love to debate in the comments about this. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you stuck around to the end, thank you very much. And be sure to like, follow, subscribe, all those wonderful things for you to stay in your money mentality.